A lot of people don't like my comedy. A lot of white people don't like my comedy. A lot of white people say this to me. Hey, Amir. Hey. You get on stage. You make your jokes about white people. You say white people this, white people that. What if I did something like that, huh? What if I got on stage and I said, yeah, black people are like this, Muslims are like that. You'd probably call me a racist, wouldn't you? And I say, yeah, I would. Yeah, you should never do that. That's bad for your health. They're like, well, you do that, Amir. You do that. You get on stage. You make your jokes about white people. Don't you think that's a kind of racism? Don't you think that's dun dun dun? Reverse racism. I said, no, I don't think that's reverse racism. Not because I think reverse racism doesn't exist, right? If you ask some black and brown people, they'll tell you flat out, there is no such thing as reverse racism. I don't agree with that. I think there is such a thing as reverse racism. And I could be a reverse racist if I wanted to. All I would need would be a time machine, right? And what I'd do is I'd get in my time machine, I'd go back in time to before Europe colonized the world, right? And I'd convince the leaders of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Central and South America to invade and colonize Europe, right? Just occupy them, steal their land and resources.
How did North Africa go from being European and Christian to becoming Arab and Muslim? How did that happen? And is that an important question? How did the Middle East go from being Christian to Muslim? And is that an important question? I think it's an overwhelmingly important question. All right. Now, to understand how that Islamic world came about, we're going to have to go about and see how Islam entered our world. Now, to do that, Islam entered the world of the Byzantine Empire. We know that in the Sirah, Muhammad's life, his last days were spent killing Christians and subjugating them. After he died, that process continued. Here we see in 25 years, 3 stages of development of the spread of Islam. This is 25 years' work. This empire is beginning to build here came from people who could be described as the apostles of Muhammad. Why is it important to know that? They knew Muhammad. They held his hand. One of them, Ali, married his daughter. Abu Bakr was his father-in-law. These people are not just brothers in the religious sense, they're brothers in the family sense. They knew Muhammad like I know my wife. And what did they do? Did they go out preaching the Quran? No, they didn't. They picked up their swords, got on their camels and horses, and went out whacking Christians.
Set up some kind of, like, I don't know, trans-Asian slave trade where we exported white people to work on giant rice plantations in China.
We're going to watch, in 70 seconds, we're going to watch 1,200 years of conquest. Look how fast this is happening. Bam! Here comes, you didn't know France was hammered that hard, did you? You heard of Tours. Watch what's happening in Spain, in the islands. Now, many of these raids or battles, if they're at the coastline, are slave raids. The slaving that took place in here was extensive and went on and on. All of this work is also happening now then. We're now into the golden age of Baghdad. This is the punishment that's being handed out to Christians everywhere. In Spain, after one battle, there were knights' heads were cut off and they made a pile so high that a man on horseback couldn't see over them. All of the European civilization in North Africa is now gone.
Just ruin Europe over the course of a couple of centuries, so all their descendants would want to migrate out and live in the places where black and brown people come from. But of course, in that time, I'd make sure I set up systems that privilege black and brown people at every conceivable social, political, and economic opportunity.
Before the Islamic juggernaut burst in from the west, the native religions of these lands were Hinduism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. The jihad against India was extraordinarily brutal, even by Islamic standards. This is because, unlike the so-called people of the book, Christians and Jews, who enjoyed some basic rights as subjected dhimmis, Hindus and Buddhists were considered idolaters, the lowest of the low, worthy only of death. Only 25 years after Muhammad's death, Islamic forces had crushed the Sassanid Persian Empire, and thus brought the spearhead of Islam to the borderlands of India. The first permanent Muslim foothold on the subcontinent was achieved with Muhammad bin Qasim's conquest of Sind in 711 AD. He demolished temples, shattered sculptures, plundered palaces, killed all able-bodied men, and carried their women and children into slavery. For example, it took his army 3 days to slaughter all the inhabitants of the port city of Debal. But the Arab-Muslim conquest would stall here in the northwestern frontier. By the end of the 10th century, however, newly Islamized Turkic tribes began to expand the Ummah into what is now northwest India proper. Mahmud of Ghazni, who was also known as a Sword of Islam, mounted 17 plundering expeditions between 997 and 1027 AD into North India. As the power of the Islamic Mughal Empire steadily declined over the 18th and 19th centuries, European influence filled the void, culminating in the establishment of British rule in 1858. This period of colonialism is well known and universally demonized in the West, and many blame British intervention for the Hindu-Muslim tensions we see in the region today. This flatly ignores the historical fact that Muslims had invaded the subcontinent 1,000 years before the Europeans, and Muslim-on-Hindu violence had been endemic ever since. To put things in perspective, the British Raj lasted only 89 years, or less than 1/3 of the 331-year span of the Mughal Empire, which was only the most recent in a series of Islamic empires that ruled India. Although British rule brought its own brand of exploitation, the relative status of Hindus improved. They were no longer spat upon infidels, but royal subjects, still occupied by a foreign ideology, but now equal to Muslims and all other residents of the subcontinent.
White people would never have any hope of real self-determination. Just every couple of decades make up some fake war as an excuse to go and bomb them back to the Stone Age and say it's for their own good because their culture's inferior, and then, just for kicks, subject white people to colored people's standards of beauty, so they end up hating the color of their own skin, eyes, and hair. If, after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of that, I got on stage at a comedy show and said, "Hey, what's the deal with white people? Why can't they dance?" That would be reverse racism.